Are you receiving me? Hello, true believers. Welcome to my channel, Mr. Miracle Comics. My name is Dave, and this is another edition of Graders Notes. Joining me tonight, of course, is the unruly Simeon himself. He's going to be one of our guest graders here. Let's see if I can figure out how to get him to come in. Well, everybody will come in.
It's a party.
It's a party and everybody's invited. All right. So, of course, on the end there, we also have Genome Presents, another one of the illustrious original graders joining us. Guys, so Unruly, how do you feel about tonight's show? What if number 24 is the review?
Well, listen, all right, here's my memories of reading the original What If back then. And I wasn't a collector of them, but I read a half a dozen, 10 or so. And my memories are they sucked. They were the worst ideas, like you got all these cool what if scenarios, and they're like, what if Punisher had a hangnail during, the Secret Wars? But I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed reading this, and I would have never checked it out if it wasn't what came up.
Nice. Yeah. I find that too with What If it's a lot of hit and miss, right? Like, some of the things are cool, some of the scenarios are good, and other ones are like, why would you even think of this? Like, this is dumb. Why was this published? Anyways, David, sir, What If 24? I know you're, the biggest Spider-Man fan out there, so you were ready for this one. No, I know you don't hate him. You're more of the anti-hero Punisher kind of guy, but
yeah.
This is an interesting take on one of the most famous Spider-Man storylines there is. So
it didn't have it didn't have the feel of a typical Spider-Man book, which I kind of appreciated. So that was pretty cool.
But you weren't too excited about it. Anyway,
not originally.
Anyways, yes. So if everybody would, if you know how this works, we're gonna give a little review of what we felt about certain aspects of the comic, the cover, the interior art, the writing, the concept of the book, and then kind of an overall how we felt about the book. Each one of those categories will be given a grade out of 5 for us. We kind of go on the half marks. And we always ask the chat as well to give us your grades on how you felt about this issue. This, of course, we're looking at, what if Spider-Man had rescued Gwen Stacy? It is, a takeoff of Amazing Spider-Man 121. Like I said, one of the most famous Spider-Man storylines there is. Like, they do it in the movies and everything. And, it's Amazing Spider-Man 121. So, did they do this classic justice? Like, everybody who was a Spider-Man fan knows the story. And if you're going to put out a what if about this big of a storyline, it better be a good one. So we're going to start with you, Wayne. Oh, Unruly, my friend. And how did you feel? Let's start at the beginning. We'll go with the cover.
All right.
I've also I can share a screen for you, by the way, if you want.
Right. Yeah, if you got screen share, that'd be great.
Yeah, I had to do this digitally, obviously. And that cover is solid. I know Kane did the interiors. It looks like, judging from the arms on Green Goblin, that's his cover too. It's a solid cover. It's nothing spectacular. And like Jackson said, the cover blurb, the most eagerly awaited what if of all.
Actually, the cover was done by John Romita Jr.
Mm-hmm.
Are you shitting me?
No, not senior, junior. So that's his stuff.
JR down there.
Yeah. He couldn't draw that tight today with the world's greatest inker, and if you put a gun to his head. That doesn't look anything like his stuff. And don't get me wrong, I like his stuff in his early days on Spidey in particular. But it's vastly different from this. Well, hell, now that you told me it's a JR, that ups it like 80 notches to see that he did something this decent. It's a solid cover. The trade dress is what it is. Spidey in the corner. goddamn barcode that idiots are willing to pay a premium for. It looks like a scene out of 121. I'll give it a 3 just because of the unexpected factor.
There you go. 3 is a pretty solid score for this cover. We'll move along and we'll, David, how did you feel about this cover? Do you remember what the Amazing Spider-Man 121's cover looks like?
Not off the top of my head. I know I've seen it several times, but this is kind of like an homage. But I don't know. There's a couple good things going on here, I'd say. And I don't really care who did it. I saw the JRJ on there right away when I was looking at it. I was like, oh boy. But I don't know. He's got like the Ditko no neck kind of thing going on with Spidey. But other than that, I really like this cover quite a bit. If you notice how happy Green Goblin looks, he's getting quite the vantage point up Gwendolyn's skirt there. So I think that's part of the attraction there. But the only real takeaway I have from this that I don't like a lot of is the fact that there's just too much writing on it. I think the picture kind of speaks for itself a lot more. Maybe one thought bubble. I have one chance or something would have been better. But I kind of dig this cover. It is a little muted, like dark. You see how much shadowing there is on the bridge, but it is a night scene. But Green Goblin's a little bit too dark. He should be a little more vibrant and green. So he stands out. But I think it's a really cool one. You got two guys racing to, like one guy's racing to stop Spidey. That's the Goblin there. And Spidey's racing to get down to Gwendolyn. But I like the upside down character too. That's kind of hard to do, I'd say. I wonder if he drew her first and then filled most everything in afterwards. I don't know, but it's kind of difficult. So I dig on that. She looks pretty good. It's kind of a believable pose. I think her legs are probably put together for editing reasons there, but you tend to flail around wildly when you fall. But I don't know. I kind of dig it. There's action going on here. There's some sense of peril. I like the bridge backdrop. That's a really cool. I like the muted tones of the blues that kind of signify like twilight. I kind of dig it. A lot of people will probably go towards purple, but I like the blues there. And I think it's just pretty solid. Goblin looks a little whimsical, but he's always a bit crazed anyway. So yeah, I dig it. I give actually a 3.5. I like this kind of thing. This reminds me more like a 50s cover or something you might see on a pulp book. So I kind of dig that and nostalgia factor. So yeah, I give it a 3.5. I think it's better for average, especially for Mr. Romita. And yeah, outside of some certain neck issues there with Spidey, I think it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, 3.5. That's pretty decent score as well, right? Same in the same area. Let me take a crack at this one here. So if you guys remember, Amazing Spider-Man 121 has a yellow cover with a bunch of sort of floating heads inside of squares. And then there's, it's kind of a mystery cover, like somebody's going to die, right? And it's got all these different characters in there. So you don't know what's going to happen until you read the book, obviously. So everybody knows the story by now. So they could take a little more license with that here on the front of, there you go. Yeah. Right. So here they can, the story's out of the bag, as it were. So they can take a little more of that storyline revealed here on the cover. So I think this is actually the better cover. I've never been a big fan of that 121 cover. I know the issue itself is iconic because of what happens with the death of Gwen Stacy in there. But here, right, this is a good example, a good scene. It happened in 121, not quite like this. So it harkens back. Everybody knows what the story is going to be about, not just with the title, but looking at this particularly famous scene with Spider-Man in it as well, right? So that was good. These guys are like, we're going to retell this, right? And with that one image, that specific image, I knew immediately. I didn't have to look at the what if or like the title of the what if to know that that's what they were going to do right here in this thing, right? So I thought really well played. Not a rug pull in any way for, there would really be no reason for what if to do that kind of thing. So kudos to John Romita Jr. You're right, Unruly. John Romita Jr. I've liked some of his stuff. Other stuff I'm like, whoa, what's going on here, right? And I think a lot of that has to do with who he's paired up with an anchor and stuff like that as well. But yeah, I'm just not sure if what happened. He just didn't transition into the digital age or anything very well. But this, I kind of felt this sort of era. This is a 1980 comic book. was kind of his best point, right? His high point. And if you had they had an artist that does the interiors done by Jill Kane, so they had him on board there if they wanted him to, right? And still picked with John Romita Jr. Of course, his dad was the artist for 121, so he probably, there was some sort of correlation there that they like to make. Like not only is the story being updated, it's also drawn by his dad. I believe it was only 6 or 7 years later, ago, that this story came out. So pretty fresh in the mind of comic collectors at the time, still fresh in our minds now. And everybody's seen the latest Spider-Man trailer where Mary Jane's falling off the bridge. So maybe that's a what if in there. What if it was Mary Jane that had fallen off the bridge? But this is the sort of scene that they show in the trailer there. Yeah, with the metaverse, all kinds of what ifs are possible now, right? But yeah, I quite like this cover. Again, I think that you're right, Dave. Like, it's a little wordy on here. Didn't need all of this, what if and what if this and whatever you do, Spider-Man, don't save her and blah, blah, blah. Right? Like I said, just that picture alone told me a lot about what they were already going to do. We didn't have to have all the other stuff in there to make me interested in grabbing a copy of this book. Now, mine's an original from 1980. Part of an estate sale that I bought some comic book boxes off. There was the entire run of What If from the early 80s in there. It was kind of neat. But yeah, I give this guy I also gave it a 3.5, right? It's John Romita Jr. He's not as good as his dad, in my opinion. But it is good. She's a little wonky. I think her kind of head placement is a little weird. Like the way, like if you did, like you said, drawing an upside down character is hard. If you turn the character over and look at her, she definitely seems a lot more wonky. Like her head snapped way too far back. Anyway, little things like that just could have been a little bit better perspective. The Green Goblin, I think, has like almost like crossed eyes in a weird way. Is this weird look on his face that kind of bothering me. But that's, John Romita Jr. for you. Anyway, I also, like I said, I gave it a 3.5 because I thought the cover conveyed the message of the comic book, but maybe slightly executed a little better. Neat that he got, the son to do the revival one after his dad's cover. Anyway, I kind of like it better than 121. Like I said, not particularly interested in this weird square floating heads cover that the other one is, but 3.5. So that's the part where we're going to ask everybody in the chat to also give us a grade. How did you feel about this cover? Dave will leave it up there while everybody decides whether they want to put in a grade or not for this What If number 24. So yeah, if you could go ahead in the chat, type in a grade of how you feel, like whether you like this cover or not, and we'll add them up and we'll add that as a mean score for our and title. So go ahead and give us a score out of 5, please.
I'm not sure how real accurate it is, but I don't know. I kind of dig the silhouette of the glider. It's kind of cool. That's how inked out. I'm not sure if it would have been better to see it though. Maybe like a dull silver might have been better. But I don't know. I like the subdued inks on Spidey too. In this one right here.
Again, I don't know. The foreshadowing on Spidey seems a little weird to me too.
The physics of the glider has always eluded me. Exactly what is he using for fuel? That it's because as far as I can make out, the fuel tank on that baby is a thimble.
Well, it depends who's drawing the glider. I've seen it pretty big sometimes, like a lot bigger than this, right? Where it could actually have a bit of a fuel tank with a couple gallons in it at least.
Maybe he's like a TIE fighter. He never strays far from home base, right? So he doesn't have to worry about that.
It's Oscorp technology. We don't know. Maybe he's made some goblin fuel, right?
But amazes me is he's always able to stand up straight, no matter he's only got feet in the stirrups. So,
well, he's pretty strong. He can do that.
Yeah, he doesn't skip leg day. That's for
no,
sure.
He doesn't.
No.
That's Jay Cutler of the freaking supervillain world.
Well, wasn't wait a minute if I'm remembering right, like the green goblin serum, Oz was basically trying to kind of make his own super soldier serum, right? And then but it wasn't quite right, and it turned him evil.
Well, he holds his own, generally speaking, in a fist fight with Spidey, and people forget
yeah.
how strong Spidey is.
Yeah.
He's strong.
He's in the 10-ton club is where he's supposed to be. That's what the old Marvel cards used to say. So
Yeah, so is the Goblin, right? He can.
Mhm.
He's about as strong as Spider-Man. It's one of the reasons why he was a threat, right?
Smithing. It's a thing. Redistribution center. Actually, now that I look at that picture, yeah, you're right. They should have stood up Goblin a little higher, I guess. But he wanted a strong base for tossing pumpkin bombs. So, and I really do dig that bridge backdrop. I think that's a cool one.
Yeah, I mean that's the setting for the whole scene. But yeah, he did a good job with the backdrop there for sure. Busted out the ruler that day.
Yeah.
All right, are we getting any more grades, or are we done here?
I think that's it. So I'll start tabulating in about 5 seconds. Let's put some more in there. Didn't see any, so. So chat comes up with a score of a 3.285. So
we're all right, right? Yeah, we're all in that range right there. We all thought it was pretty good, a little above average, but maybe could have been executed a little better, but that's okay. All right, so let's move on, and we'll hit the interior of this book. So the interior is done by Jill Kane. Of course, he is like legendary Bronze Age, end of the Silver Age, Bronze Age, into the Copper Age artist. Took a long time on X-Men and whatnot. David, we'll start with you this time. How did you feel about the interior art of Mr. Kane's here?
Well, it's no mystery or no secret that I'm a big fan of his. I think he's almost criminally underrated sometimes when people have conversations about the greats of all time, and I think he's up there. There's a little bit of wonkiness here and there in this book. I think some of that might be attributed to just the physics of Spidey himself. He's got to be a tough character to really capture well. Just the positions he puts himself in, but it's amazing how photogenic, and then that's a weird word to describe the Gil is with the interiors of his books, man. It's almost like a movie capture a lot of times. But let me get into some negatives. I'll do a negative first. Let's see if I have a good example here. Gil's eyes, man, they are a trademark, right? Almost as much as the up the nose shot, which are not really too many in this book anyway. I don't like the way he does eyes too much. They're way too big sometimes, and there's like no detail in them. They're just gigantic whites with pupils in them. Let's see if I can find a really good example of it. Sometimes they're okay, but when he tries to go for surprised or shocked, I don't think it works too well. I do not like his Iwado at all, by the way, either. Oh, come on, where are the eyes? He made me look like an idiot now. See, remember lots more. Of course, Spidey's got his mask on there. Yeah, like right here. See, I don't like the way he does Spidey's eyes, even though they're kind of expressive here, and Gwen's eyes. They're just a little too big and kind of, I don't know, just empty looking. But I mean, other than that, man, this is something else, man. I like this art style, this comic book style. It's almost like a cross. He also has like a cross between like a Sunday morning paper kind of cartoonist with a dyed-in-the-wool freaking comics artist. It's just I like it, and it just works. But what most interested me in him is his angles, man. There's very few straight-on shots. Like this face shot's like one of the few ones you get, but you'll see Spidey at this nice little angle here, and it just gives a sense of depth to a lot of his work that I think is missing from a lot of artists. Some great spots here of like Spidey straining to get above the water and then sucking in breath. That's a great shot. And bold, man. You want to see some bold lines? Kirby's got nothing on this guy when he's really dialing it in. There's a couple of these. Look at how thick some of these freaking lines are on the edging. It's awesome, man. I like that. It takes a brave artist to do things like that, and I guarantee he didn't do much erasing or whatever. So I kind of dig it. But Spidey's always in some interesting pose, as he should be, because they see that kind of character, an agile character. Great angles. Pretty solid inking too. This was definitely not over inked to any great degree. Goblin does look nice, suitably maniacal in a few shots like this one. Once again, eyes may be a little big, but it's kind of his thing. But yeah, it's just solid all the way throughout. He doesn't waste time. Like if you look at Parker's face, other than the eyes here, he doesn't go crazy with the cross hatching or try to put ridiculous amounts of detail in the face for no good reason. It just puts it out there and lets you work with it. I can appreciate that, man. Gwen, like I said, if it wasn't for her big eyes, she'd look really good. Maybe just ease the eyes down or put a more maybe a little more Ovaltine. Is that's even a word? It is now. It's not just a drink anymore, kids, but just a lot of cool shots in this book. I mean, nothing that's gonna like change the world of comics, but great action shots like this. That's a perfect Spidey punch in his flying in. Yeah, I love the interior of this book. I gave it a 4. The only complaints you may have is some of the colors, and this is a lot of just the printing really of the time. Not much getting around that. Some of the prints obviously washed. But just great action scenes, great perspective shots, tiny bit of wonkiness here and there. And sometimes there's a little bit of like inconsistency. Like Goblin looks a little bit emaciated here as opposed to some of the earlier shots, but just great, man. This guy tells us such a great story. He's one of the greats, and I gave it a 4. I really love the interior of this book.
Nice. Oh, yeah, man. Like, yeah, 4 is a good score. I would give it a 4, maybe. I don't know. Let's see. I would never say that Gil Kane wasn't one of the greats. I mean, that guy's had what comic book hasn't this guy drawn? Like everything, right? From Conan the Barbarian to Amazing Spider-Man to X-Men and Daredevil, everything, right? He's at least drawn a cover for it. You know what I mean? Or something. Unfortunately, we lost Mr. Kane in 2000, I believe. He passed away, but yeah, nobody draws as good of, he can hold his own with anybody in a fight scene, right? Drawing out fight scenes is, wham, like big smashes all the time. Lots of, really nice perspectives when he gets going in the fights and stuff like that. You're right. He's definitely putting the inker here. Who's he inking with in this book today? Frank Gay Okia? Maybe. Definitely throwing down some hard inks on Jill's stuff, but that's okay. Or Gil's stuff. Yeah, I like that picture there. You can see that one. Maybe I'll give myself the solo. Maybe I'll do the solo for this one.
I figured since you had the book, you wanted to show it off. So
yeah, right. Great. That's fantastic, man. Like, look at that look of surprise on the Goblin's face right before Spider-Man like decks him into next week. You know what I mean? That's perfect. Yeah, man. Gil's coming in. And I've never seen a comic book where he just phones it in. You know what I mean? He always is putting some effort into everything. This whole fight scene reimagined between Green Goblin and Spider-Man is great. It's like panel for panel, you can follow along, and it looks like these guys are really walloping each other. Right? Just exactly what I want to see. I don't want to see 2 panels of fight scene and then we're back to whining or anything like that. No, he really gives her. Definitely takes it to another level with the fight scene, which even in a what if comic, because a what if comic, one of the problems I've always found is they don't focus on any of the art, right? They're trying to tell as much of that old story, and even if that old story covered 10 issues in the original Amazing Spider-Man, they want to squeeze it all into the what if, so there's not a lot of stuff, but these guys take the time. It's basically just a retelling of 121 from a different part of the multiverse, I guess. And yeah, like I said, never phones it in. Great scenes throughout, like even Peter diving out that window, looks great, right? Lots of action. You can see what's happening there. Really, really cool. And nobody else, you guys can mention this there. In this issue, also one of these. So a lot of people don't realize the untold tales of the Marvel Universe that are in the back of What Ifs are canon stories. They're not what if stories. And this is part of the Eternals origin story, which takes place over a few issues. Who did the art for this guy?
Rich Buckler.
What's that?
Rich Buckler.
Yeah. I don't mind Buckler stuff, right? I think the problem I had with this is that he's trying. It's a Kirby thing, and he's trying to do too much Kirby. Right? He should have stuck with Rich Buckler stuff. Hostess Fruit Pie ad's pretty good. Good interior art on that. But yeah, there's an Eternals. The Eternals origin story takes place over a few of these. Anyways, Buckler stuff here in the back is pretty good. It's not the greatest. They could have had some more, but they only have a few pages, so I think he was just in a bit of a rush to get stuff done. Getting back to Mr. Kane stuff, for Mr. Kane, I gave the interior 3.5. Right, I thought it was above average for sure. Fight scenes are fantastic. The inking for me, I think, was a little overdone. Right, Gil doesn't need that much inking on his stuff. I do find sometimes when he gets into those shots of where characters are just having dialogue, nobody's in a big action sequence or stuff, I find his panels get a little flat, sometimes a little wonky. Like he almost needs guys to be jumping around doing crazy stuff to get proper perspectives and stuff like that, right? Other than that, right, it really is a nice action-packed stuff. Like just this little scene with him changing his tie just seems a little flat, seems a little blasé kind of deal. There was a whole wedding sequence. We'll get into the story part of that next, but yeah, really well done. 3.5 for me. Right. Wayne, my man. The Unruly Simeon. What do you feel, sir? Let me get you back in here.
I agree with you. His mundania isn't nearly as captivating as the action sequences, but whose is really, you know? But yeah, if you can see that page, where they're recapping the original fight, it's just brilliant. Just like Dave said, different angles. I mean, he doesn't just draw a static shot. He's coming at you from like he's storyboarding movie shots. And Kane is, I don't know that he's underrated, man. Maybe the newer generation that are smart enough to know about Kirby and Romita and Adams and blah blah blah. Maybe they don't appreciate him, but I think all of us that were around when he was drawing, we love him. And you're right, he drew everything. It seems like he was the pinch hitter extraordinaire.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of a series where he just hung, he was the primary artist. And I'm sure there was one or two there somewhere, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. But that was my introduction to him, was when he filled in for Barry Windsor Smith on 3 or 4 of those first 24 Conans. And he was, yeah. I didn't mind the transition at all. But yeah, these are great. And that shot you showed later on when Spidey takes him out and it's the headshot in the top left corner, that is just as good as anybody's ever drawn Goblin ever.
Yeah.
And I gotta agree with you too, Genome. I do not care for his Watcher. That would be my major detraction in this entire issue is, oh my God, he just drew the Watcher horribly. He's more than just a giant blobby head, for Christ's sake. And Kane, but I'll tell you what now, I really appreciate Kane and I respect him. But when I buy these artist editions, that reprint it they do high res scans of the original artwork and print it in that size. I've got Kirby, I've got Byrne, I've got Buscema, I'm looking at Frank Miller, I'm looking at Kaluta. I would never occur to me to buy one of Kane's artist edition, but looking at this, making me rethink that. I'm going to have to snag one of his because I know he's got a Spider-Man artist edition. So I'm going to have to check that out. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like these heavy inks on him, though. I got to disagree with you there, Miracle. I like these heavy inks on him. Because a lot of times, particularly in the arms and legs when he's doing these akimbo poses, you know. He draws, he's just a little too angular, you know. It's not quite the way a real arm or leg would look to me. And like, see in that top panel you're showing, looking at Goblin's right arm, I promise you the inker added a ton of depth to that tricep. Because that's like a Gil Kane trademark, is these, you know, very narrow triceps from weird angles. But I love the dude, and I really enjoyed reading this. I was really amazed at how much better the art was than I was expecting it to be. So I'm going to give him a solid 4. And I love the
Nice.
old school Goblin. I love that stupid freaking Charles Dickens nightcap thing he rocks, you know. It was just a blast, because this is the era I started reading Spidey, right around the teens, the 120s. That's when I originally started buying it off the rack. So this was like a huge trip down memory lane for me. Even though this takes place a decade later, the story is set 1 year to the day after Gwen dies. And they were really trying to invoke that feel, and I dug the hell out of it. I give Mr. Kane a solid 4 for this.
Nice. I'd agree with that. All
Also,
right, so
he's here. So
Biggie. Hey Biggie. How you doing, brother? Speaking of Biggie and the rest of the chat, let's get your grades in here on the interior art. How did you guys feel about Gil Kane's work here? We've been showing it a little bit on the screen. You might be familiar with this issue in particular. I know they did come out with a True Believers copy of this. Maybe a lot of you bought that back then. But just, you know, even what we've shown on the screen and what I've shown from the book here should give you a good sense of the idea, you know, whether this was good, whether it was crap. So if you don't mind giving us a grade out of 5, you can go ahead and put that in the chat now. Whew, man, oh man.
it's a lot to unpack there.
What's that?
So there was a lot to unpack there.
There was a lot to unpack.
People know what I'm talking about. Look at this line work right here for her hair and his face. That is freaking dense. I love it. Okay, let me start getting grades here before I keep ogling. Let's see, 3.5.
And I love classic old Aunt May. Aunt May cannot be a hot Marissa Tomei, for Christ's sake.
I wonder if they'll have like they're supposed to do this crossover in the new movie. Maybe they'll have like old Aunt May see new hot Aunt May. Man, Aunt
Through
May.
here darkly, right? Yep. Great graphic storytelling. Yep.
Yes.
Great, great action. You're right. Like on some of the more sedate stuff, it's nothing too incredible or special. But when the movement picks up, that's where she shines the best for sure.
But back in 1980, when they drew the Watcher, he did have a big bald head, right? So I don't think it's that bad of a drawing. It kind of fits with the time that he had. He didn't have like the big kind of weird lollipop kind of looking head that he has now, but
looks kind of like Telly Savalas there.
Little. Just give him a lollipop and
Let's
awesome.
see.
I think that's going to be excited for grades.
Counting 5, 4,
gonna vote
3,
voted.
2, 1. That's it. All right. So let me tabulate here. And you know the funny part, we didn't lose. We got the same amount of votes as last time, so that's pretty good actually.
Nice. We have a loyal audience here for Graders Notes and people that we really like, and we like to see them every couple weeks when we do this. So
come in with a 3.5 average.
Nice.
Not bad at all. So I think they are kind of in agreement with us in both facets so far.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of in agreement here. We're all in the same ballpark. You know, maybe Unruly likes it a little bit more.
This art right here in the Eternals, it reminds me a lot of the Thor of the time.
Yeah, I can see that.
Not just because of the stuff they're wearing, but just the art style reminds me a lot of that. A lot of busy scenes.
Which is very much Kirby-esque, right? Like he just went. I think they went a little too far trying to do it, trying to pack too much into like 4 pages.
Yeah, agreed. All right, let me scroll up here. Did you want me to take this down again?
No, that's okay. We're going to talk about the story.
Yeah. Do you have a panel? Who's starting this one? It's your turn to start, right, Dave?
Yes, it's my turn to start.
Is there anywhere you want to start in particular so I can get it pulled up here?
Right at the beginning. Okay, maybe I'll just do a solo layout for this one. If I can remember it. There we go. So I'm getting better at this. So the story. So in the original story, I don't know how many people remember this. Green Goblin knocks Gwen Stacy off of a bridge. Peter, as Spider-Man, whips down with a web, grabs her with the web, yanks her, and of course snaps her spine, killing her. Right. So it was a big deal, big effect on Spider-Man as a whole. Really affected the Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, and Spectacular Spider-Man storylines for years. It still has an effect on Peter, right? When he thinks about that kind of stuff. Here in this one, they switch it up. Instead of thwipping and breaking her spine, he dives for her and grabs her, and they both go into the water with him protecting her, right? And she lives. The Green Goblin, he doesn't immediately go after the Green Goblin. So this time the Green Goblin gets away, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. Well, I mean, I think he gets away in the first one too, doesn't he? But, Peter spends his time with Gwen, and she's like, finds out he's Spider-Man, and, which of course goes back to who killed her father, and she has always blamed Spider-Man, but whatever. They end up saying, I saved your life. Shut up. I didn't kill your dad. And let's get married. But this gives the Green Goblin time to do something that I always thought, why doesn't one of these guys just do this? And finally, here in What If, one of these Spider-Man villains finally does this. He takes his identity, puts it in an envelope, and mails it to somebody. Right? Stop me now, Spider-Man. I'm going to give your worst enemy your identity. Even as a kid, I was always like, well, Doc Ock knows who he is. The Vulture knows who he is. Green Goblin knows who he is. And nobody ever outs him, right? Nobody ever goes on the news and says, hey, this guy's Peter Parker, right? I suppose they're worried that, he knows who they are and everything like that. I don't know. But yeah, finally in the What If, that's what the Green Goblin does. There's a whole little to-do going on. But instead of, killing the Green Goblin and all this stuff, he ends up basically getting Harry to kind of snap out of it, or Norman to snap out of it, right? And become Harry's father again. Interesting take. Of course, the wedding's on, everybody gets married, all this stuff. But guess who the Green Goblin sent that story to? Of course, J. Jonah Jameson, right? And he ruins Peter's secret identity. Everybody knows it. The cops are after him now. Flash hates him. The wedding's off. Robbie Robinson quits over J. Jonah Jameson's behaviors. All kinds of stuff going on in the story. I thought it was really, quite well told. Like, if Gwen didn't die when Gwen died, Spider-Man wouldn't be the Spider-Man we have now, right? And they really took that and ran with it here. Like, who really got biggest effect from Gwen Stacy's death? Spider-Man. Who had the biggest effect from Gwen Stacy living? Spider-Man, right? So either way, Spider-Man was screwed in all this, but at least he was screwed where nobody knew who he was, right? Now, again, we're looking back at the movie where J. Jonah Jameson outs Spider-Man, but of course, that has nothing to do with this What If, but it's just kind of neat that they kind of pulled that off in 180. Anyways, I really thought the story was much better than most What If stories are. Most What If stories really are weird. They're either weird or implausible beyond like your suspension of disbelief, or or they are hit, and they do have a few that are actually good. A couple of them. What if Doctor Doom became a good guy? That's actually a well written one and stuff like that. But this was a particularly well written one in my opinion, and I gave the story for this one a 4 in total. I gave the Eternal story in the back a 2. It really didn't. It was weird. They could have had some more. It didn't really push the whole narrative of the origins, but of course, it was just 4 pages. So how much could they do, right? Now it continues on in the next issue of What If, but yeah. For the storyline here. Sorry, I forget who wrote this one again. Tony Isabella. Sir, you have written a very good Spider-Man story and a very good take on what may have happened if Gwen Stacy had have lived. But at least she would have been alive. And I think, given the option, if Peter had have known, like if Gwen Stacy dies, you'll go on to be Spider-Man, you'll marry Mary Jane, and your life will be Spider-Man, or you could choose to be a haunted criminal, but Gwen lives. I think he's a good enough guy that he would have taken the hit himself and saved Gwen, but didn't happen that way in continuity. Only here in the What If, and either way, Peter got screwed for that one. All right, let's bring in my other graders. Who's after me? Wait, Unruly, you after me?
I think so.
Okay, we'll get you set up. Let's hear your take on this What If story, my friend.
All right. Like I said, I was surprised to enjoy it as much as I did. I think the idea was great. However, I hate. Let's recap. Let's spend 7 or 8 pages recapping what happened in that in canon. It drove me crazy as a kid. They're not nearly as guilty of it today, but every Marvel comic that came out after the first half a dozen issues of a title had a 2 or 3 page recap of what had happened before, which is a complete. I know why they do it. I'm just saying, all you idiots with short attention spans, bite me right in the taint. And all you new readers, I don't care. I don't care that you need a recap. You're wasting 2 or 3 pages of precious story that I wanted. All right, done ranting. The idea was really good, except, and this is where I'll critique it. When he pulls Gwen up out of the water and she sees him, oh, Peter, oh my God, you're Spider-Man, you killed my dad. And in just a few moments, he relays the story, calms her down, and gets her to marry him. Now, in my experience with women, that's more of a 2 or 3 day process at best over something that major. It's certainly not happening in 1 page of my life. And
2 or 3 days. You're better at it than me, brother.
And then when he's fighting Goblin at Osborn's house, and Goblin sees his son willing to defend him, and really, that was some serious psychopathy going on there between Senior and Junior. You know what I'm saying? But oh, my son is not the pussy that I always thought he was. He's willing to fight Spider-Man for me. I will completely turn over a new leaf and turn myself into the authorities when it is proper. No, you won't, you sick bastard. That's just not realistic. It's just not. I'm sorry. Or it could have been done better. That's where you could have taken 2 or 3 pages and cemented it, not just 2 or 3 panels. But now what I did like is the very end of the story. I like Robbie punching J. Jonah in the gut, because let's face it, we've all wanted to throw J. Jonah off a building. So I like it was just, that was the style of comics. That was 40 freaking years ago. Things weren't nearly as sophisticated, especially in mainstream comics, as they are today. I would like to see a good writer, retell this story today. That would interest me. But I did enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this comic, even on digital. So I'm going to give it a 3.5. The story gets a 3.5 from the Unruly One.
3.5. Yeah, well, I mean, that's still above average, like you said. Generally, when you go into a what if story, you're not expecting a lot, right? And I think this one surprised me. The writing was pretty good, and the story, yeah, like I get what you're saying, man. Like the Goblin kind of turns a new leaf pretty quick, right? And for a weird reason. And they could have taken some of that recap and just kind of played that out a little bit more so that he came around. Anyway, David, you're up, my friend. How did you feel about the story?
All right. Yeah. Sometimes, like you said, What If is really hit or miss, man. It's one of the most uneven series that Marvel's ever done. Great idea in concept, but sometimes it was also the dumping ground for a lot of really piss poor ones. But this one was a better than average one, and it helps because they had pretty strong source materials to go from, so they didn't have to get anything too crazy, right? Nothing extraordinarily weird happens in this book. So that's a good thing. It's a more muted story, and it's a much more street level thing. There's a couple inconsistencies here I'll talk about in a bit, but for the most part, books like this in general do something very well, and that's to make you anticipate turning every page for the big reveal to happen. When is it all going to come crashing down, right? Because like say the Star Wars prequels, right? We know Darth Vader's going to turn bad, right? We just know he's going to, but when's it going to happen? What's going to set it off? So you just and you have this like weird feeling in your gut. It's like that's an awful feeling sometimes, but I don't know. This book conveys that because you keep waiting for the shoe to drop. Okay, so he rescues Gwen, great. Then he fights off the Goblin, great. He keeps fighting the Goblin all throughout the book. Goblin's like going to give away his secret. I guess he was going to just go on the news or something before he dropped it in the mail. But then you see him mail it. It's like, and then you kind of forget about it, that he did that, and then they're going back to fighting again. Then they fight for the final time. Goblin turns a new leaf. All's right with the world. Spidey goes ahead with the wedding, and then it all comes tumbling down, and it's kind of left on a cliffhanger. It's like there's no happy ending here. Maybe not a bad ending. Maybe things get worked out. We don't know, but it is all going to change for Spider-Man, and I thought it was a really good ending. Now, some of the inconsistencies I mentioned earlier, like they took great pains to tell how sick Spider-Man was in this book at the beginning, but that went out the window like right away. He's like, I have enough energy for one good punch, and that's all I can do. And then the rest of it, he's just fighting through the rest of the book. So I guess he got over the weakness that he had that was so bad. The wedding, oh my gosh, you're right, man. Maybe Spidey has a yacht we don't know about, but she changed her mind awful dang quick. From someone who hated Spider-Man like with a passion or whatever. Instantly, oh, it's you, Peter. I guess that's okay. Let's go ahead and get married. There's no real time frame giving here, but I don't think it was that long, a day, but they already had the wedding planned and they're already out there, had everyone invited. They're actually in the big cathedral. Where'd all this money coming from? I can't remember was it her folks loaded or something, but because Peter didn't have no money. But I don't know. It was just cool. It was a cool take on a more mundane thing as far as like something that Uatu would be interested in. And I kind of dug it. It was just a fun, brisk read. I mean, it was a little wordy in the parts where there weren't action, but it was nice to see like what a hated character Jameson, how petty he could be. That was kind of a nice little touch too. They really made you hate him. It's hard to really hate somebody in the comics because you get so used to the cartoon freaking villains and all that, but you really hate Jameson in this book. He's a jackass. So that was done well. And I don't know, the story just flowed. I had a good time with it. Oh, and one of the things, and actually, I got the screen share if you'll pop it up there again. Another thing that resonated with me in the story, this brought me back to 4th or 5th grade. And I read an article in a magazine about like superhero movie physics. They were talking about the movie Superman. And they said, like when Lois falls off the building, whatever, and the movie, he goes down and swoops up and catches her. He says, some scientist or something wrote, or an engineer wrote up, so like, if he did that in real life, she would have splattered all over his arms like a grease spot. And they actually kind of addressed that in here in Gwen's death. So that was kind of a cool thing. And it just kind of had, I don't know, some historical context for me, though, but I thought that was an interesting idea. And, but just okay. I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking, but it was a good idea. They kept it suitably calm. Like, you know, the whole Avengers didn't get involved. Thor didn't come thundering down to help save the day either. The Hulk didn't rampage through the city or whatever too to give it some more fireworks. So I kind of dig it. I gave it a 3.5. I thought it was handled tastefully, and I do like the kind of unfinished ending. Just let your mind take it from there. Now what's going to happen? Is he going to be on the run for the rest of his life? He's going to turn into John Q. Public. Is he going to go in the witness protection program? Is he going to prison? What's going to happen to this guy? What's going on with the marriage? Who knows? But that was a good ending. So 3.5, pretty solid read.
Nice. Yeah. See, well, now you mentioned the wedding. I wasn't really thinking about the timeline, right? Because Goblin mailed that letter, and then that was the same day that Spider-Man saved Gwen, and he asked her to marry her. And then what does Inner City Mail take? Like 2 days? Right?
It was
and
the next morning.
Dress and a priest and everything all set up. Everybody was in tuxedos and ready to go in 2 days. I'm like, man, it took my wife like months to plan our wedding.
You can tell she doesn't watch the stream. All right.
Yeah. Right. So let's move over to the chat. How did you guys feel about this story? Very much started kind of mirroring what's going on in the movies. Definitely a different take on what may have happened in the long run of all this. And if you guys in the chat could go ahead and give us a grade, we very much appreciate that. 3 out of 5, please.
I really like this onomatopoeia here. This splunch is awesome. Best splunch I've ever seen.
Gil definitely is good with the onomatopoeias and everything all over the place in this book. Boom, wow, wow, bam, smash, whap, crash with a K. Anyway, yeah, he's good with that. But that's like old school, and he is old school comic artist, right? Like that's the way he was.
John Beatty, because I was talking to him a little bit about Gil, because he did a Comic-Con, or I don't know if it was a Comic-Con, something in the late 70s or early 80s he did with him. And he said he loved to tell stories. Gil did. He'd always start out, but son, let me tell you about working with, Jack Kirby or something like that. He'd always be like, son, let me tell you. He said he loved to tell stories.
Nice.
A little bit of minutia there for you.
Yeah, I'm sure he had some great stories. Like I said, he's been on everybody's book in DC and Marvel. Mostly Marvel. Being awfully quiet over there, Unruly.
I'm counting, so I need all my fingers.
What's that?
The meal served on Game Force.
I didn't want to say that out loud.
Yeah. You just put it up in chat for everyone to read for all eternity now. Mm-hmm.
Splunch.
I think that's the first time I've ever seen that particular onomatopoeia. Splunch.
Splunch. Yeah, there's quite a bit in here. Got the floating heads cover in there too.
Yeah, I thought that opening page was really well done with the backdrop of the city and her face. That's one of the better faces he drew in the whole issue.
Her eyes are a little more muted there, so that's not so bad. I like the angle he chose here. I think it's pretty cool. Not just an over the shoulder shot. He actually backed up a little bit, which is nice. Get those kids off my lawn. Yep. Probably stories like that too. And he was talking about like Liefeld and Jim Lee at that point. So
look, they have an advertisement in here. A new show, Thundar the Barbarian.
It's sure to be a winner.
What, you don't like Thundar?
Oh, he was awesome. He's right there with Lightnar.
Lightnar. And Ukla the Mock. All right. Is that all the grades we're going to get here?
I think so. So let me tabulate. Oh, we're down 1 grade.
Oh, no. Sleeping.
Still better than average, I think, for us. So comes into a 3 for the story. Once again, no big deviations.
No big deviations. All right. So here we come to the concept of the book. This is the category is like, was this a stupid idea? Was there some brilliant insights that came up with this idea? David, sir, we are going to start with you on this one, my friend. How did you feel about the concept of this book?
for, like I said, for a what if story, it was kind of sedate, which I kind of dig on. And it was a good one. This is one that, because comic fans were not as plentiful as they became in the not too distant future from now, or from then, should I say. So a lot of people knew the story, and a lot of people like Spider-Man. So this is the kind of story that would resonate with people. So they didn't just pick some obscure character and throw him out there. What if Moon Knight didn't have a fractured psyche or something? They took a very big event from Marvel's pretty recent past and gave it, turned it on its head a little bit. What happens if you change events? And, that might have been like one of the first experiences that younger people might have had with like a time paradox. What happens when you start changing even small things? So, but that's kind of what if in general. But this event really kind of, I don't know, it just brings it home for the character, and I thought it was a good idea. I'm not sure how good what if sales were at the time. So a lot of times when a book sales are starting to slip, they start throwing Spider-Man on there. He was the recipe for selling books. So some of that might have been part of the concept, but I don't know. I think it's something that I don't know if this was a shooter idea. This kind of reeks of him, actually. It's like, hey guys, I had an idea. let's take one of the biggest events of the last 10 years and turn it around and see people buy it. So I think it was a solid one. Being as it's kind of far into the what if run, though, it wasn't nothing revolutionary, and really it is an old thing in like temporal mechanics or whatever, if you start changing little things and then you get the butterfly effect or whatever other nonsense you want to talk about, right? So, all that being said, it always behooves Marvel to put Spider-Man on the cover of a book because they're going to sell probably twice as many copies of it if they hadn't. And so I think it was a solid one. I mean, once again, it was small potatoes when it comes to the overall universe thing, but it was a big change to a popular character, and I think it was smart. And maybe took a little courage because then people get the whole idea, no one ever dies in comics, right? So it was brave to leave Gwen dead. But this one's like, well, maybe she's still alive. So it was kind of a bit of waffling in a way, but I don't know. I think it was a good waffle because then what happens to Mary Jane? It'd been funny if not funny, but it would have been interesting if she died in a bus crash or something shortly after, just on the side panel or something, or maybe those mafia guys he was fighting, like a stray bullet from them killed Mary Jane or something because Gwen had lived or whatever. So whatever the case may be, I think it was a pretty solid concept as far as what ifs go. And I'm going to give it a 3.52 just because, they took a little bit of stones to put this story out there. When you have a character that's definitively dead and you make them alive again, kind of cool. So yeah, 3.5. I think it's a pretty solid concept.
Nice. Cool. I too thought, wait, nope. Really, am I next or are you next, bud?
I think you are.
Okay. Concept wise of this book, of course you got to hit this one up, man. This is like one of the most famous stories in Spider-Man's history. Like I said, it had a huge effect on him for the next, the whole Copper Age, basically. Whenever any writer ever wanted to just put a downer panel in there, they'd be like, oh, I was just thinking about Gwen and how she died, right? And Spider-Man would be racked with guilt. And it kind of kept him going. Like, I have to make up for this, right? I have to be Spider-Man. I have to make up for all this. So taking that element out is as a concept is pretty ballsy. I mean, like I said, it's a really, really famous storyline. Everybody knows it. So having that perspective of, okay, well, what happened if just this one thing changed? How much else would change, right? And that's kind of like different than a lot of the what if books. Like, sure, lots of what if books are like, oh, what if this changed? But they're not basing it on a specific storyline. They're like, oh, what if Captain America became president of the United States? Or what if, it wasn't Stephen Strange that became, master of the mystic arts and the sorcerer supreme? That's another one, and stuff like that. But they're always, it's not just sort of that famous one moment in a character's life that changes usually. Right. There's a couple what ifs that do that. So, but this one very much is. It's just, it could have gone this way or it could have gone this way. And then continuity went this way. And let's see what would happen if it went this way. I think it would be a neat idea if in some way because Gwen lived, that Goblin got away and killed Mary Jane instead, in a way, right? Like it was either one or the other. In sort of, not that Spider-Man would know that, but we would know that. Kind of would have been kind of a poignant deal on there. Yeah, saving Gwen would have basically saved everybody else in Spider-Man's life, right? It would have, Norman would have been cured, Harry would have never become the Green Goblin, Flash would I doubt there'd be a Hobgoblin, right? Ned probably would never have become the Hobgoblin. Mary Jane would never have hooked up with Spider-Man, Peter Parker, right? So she would have gone on to be an actress or a model or whatever she was doing in her own life. But everybody would have been okay except Peter, right? So I thought it was a neat concept. I thought it was good. I thought that if you're gonna do this, like rewrite one of the most famous stories, go for gold, and I think they did. Trying to change, like everything would have changed for everybody else, and Peter would have been screwed at one point. I gave the concept a 4. I thought it was really good to definitely rewrite this, one of the more famous Bronze Age stories. And like I said, it wasn't that long. The original story was published before they put out this What If, only a few years. I know in our brains it seems like so long ago because it was 40 years ago, but it wasn't that long. So this was a really famous story that was fresh in comic readers' minds still, right? If you'd been collecting Spider-Man for only a few years, you would have had that storyline. So yeah, I ended up giving it a 4. Whew. Whew. And Mr. Simeon, how did you feel about this, sir?
I rate this concept high. You got to understand what's cool is you were saying it's Marvel had this story is looking at Marvel's recent past. In 1980, the Marvel Hero Superhero universe had just been eligible to vote. It was only 18 years old at the time. And one of the things that helped set Marvel apart from its distinguished competition was how interrelated everything was, which wasn't really something you saw a whole lot from National in the 40s and 50s. They didn't start really weaving each other in and out of their stories to a great degree, or keeping track of what had gone before specifically, until Marvel started doing it. So yeah, man, this was this concept is incredible. And 1980 was a busy year for me. That's the year I enlisted. I dropped out of high school. I was working, blah blah blah. So I wasn't reading comics. I hadn't been for a couple of years. So I missed this on the first go round, and I'm really glad that I read it for this. I think the concept was a great idea, but like I said, the dated storytelling kind of ruined it for me. But if we're going on pure concept alone, I'll give this a solid 4.0.
There you go. Kind of where we were all hitting in there again. It can't be dated storytelling, Wayne, because this is 1980s storytelling. This was the Bronze Age storytelling. So I don't think it was dated for its time. It seems dated to us now, 40 years later, but for its time, it wasn't dated, right? So I don't know. I can't always judge a Bronze Age comic against something that happens in the modern day, right? Comics were written for, they still had very much the idea that comics were for kids back in these days. Right? It was just sort of starting.
Just look at the advertisements if people don't think that's true.
yeah, right. Here, Saturday morning cartoons. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until right around this era that, Marvel started doing some more adult stuff. DC started doing more adult stuff, right? Marvel started coming out with Epic, trying to make sure that they didn't adult up their Marvel brand too much, right? That was still for the kiddies at that time, so they had to come up with Epic and stuff like that. But I don't know. Comics, they just ain't what they used to be.
No, they ain't.
All right, let's turn it over to our chat. Everybody that's still in the chat there, if you want to give us a grade on the concept, was this a good concept? Was this a weird concept? Was this something that should never have even been a concept? Please let us know from in your esteemed chat line. What the hell am I trying to say? I totally get lost sometimes.
Sometimes you just leave it off and just
I
run with
know.
the next
It's
thing.
like,
Talk about goldfish.
and
Or
anyway, the cake is a
quasars or something.
lie, so be careful. Yeah, sometimes you can totally just. Sometimes you're just talking just to talk, just to make sure that you're not having tons of dead air on here, right? Like
You've never seen my Friday show, have you?
We obviously have a rapport and we talk well and we mix it up a little bit, but sometimes you're just like, what am I even trying to say? I'm losing everybody. Just keep talking. That's all. Just keep on talking.
I think we're all in agreement, though, that it was a really, really, really solid concept, especially for a what if. And it wasn't like a weird concept. Like I said, what if a lot of times fell into the weirdness thing? It's like, okay, what can we do that's kooky, that's going to impress people? This was not that weird. It's like just one pivotal event. What happens when you change it?
I think like the first maybe 30, 40 issues of What If, they had some pretty solid concepts in here. What if Elektra didn't die? What if, like I said, Stephen Strange wasn't the guy that became the Sorcerer Supreme. And then it kind of just went off the rails after that and got really, really weird. And the art just suffered and people were not liking it. And then they kind of revamped it with even weirder concepts and stuff that was just like, why would you even think of this? This is weird and dumb, right? But I mean, at first they were like pretty good. Like, what if Conan the Barbarian came into the 21st century, right? Like, that's cool. Gets like a friggin' 44 Magnum. Of course he does.
Yep.
What else would he get, right? What if the Incredible Hulk became a barbarian? That was a fun issue, right? Kind of a weird, a little bit more of a dumb concept, but it was good. What if the Phoenix hadn't died? Like, what if she had gone on and been a crazy character forever? Lots of stuff that I'm sure this whole thing came around just the Marvel bullpen guys BSing in the coffee room. Man, what happens if Gwen Stacy didn't die? It's too bad we can't have that. I wanted to create a character called Gwen Spider Gwen. Yeah. No, you'll have to wait 10, 20 years, 30 years to do that. I knew I'd get Spider Gwen in there somewhere, David.
Angry at my blood, Sonny.
Back then, there was a genuine editorial oversight, and somebody, was sitting down like Feige does now with the movies. They had, like, Shooter had an idea of where everything was going. I don't think that's the case anymore. How can it be with 3 or 4 events a year running concurrently sometimes?
Yeah, I know. It's like everything's an event in Marvel now. And DC.
But I'm wondering too, was there commercial considerations? Because obviously, everyone was going to buy this issue.
Yeah. I think What If had like a limited popularity to it. It was enough. It was making money that they kept it going, right? But they didn't ever have to have a main artist and a main writer to it, right? They could always get some one-offs for every month, right? If somebody on the bullpen needed something to do, they got the What If issue, right? But there were some good ones. I mean, some guys obviously wanted to submit some good stories. Do we get all of our grades in, you think?
I haven't seen one in a little bit, so yep, I got them all, so let me go ahead and get them tabulated here. We picked up an extra one in that one, so.
Oh, we got another one?
Mm-hmm. And they came in at a 3.5.
3.5. Matt Woods wonders if he's the only old collector that likes Spider-Gwen. No, I like her too. I think she's good. I like some of these new characters. Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen. Right? It's good. All right, so guess if we've got those guys in, we're just gonna have to hit it on the overall of this book, and yeah, we'll call her a night after that. Overall, and let's start with you, Unruly. How did you feel was the overall for this book for you?
Well, I'm not, the mathematician that Kenny is. I don't sit there and tote up my scores and average them out. I would say overall, I would give this a solid 3.
Solid 3. Okay.
Oh.
I mean, no, that's good, right?
It's bare bones, isn't it?
Little bare bones. How about you, Genome? How do you feel about it? What's your overall impression of this book?
Well, on this one, I let math decide, and I kind of agree with math. I just do a quick recap here of what I did. For the cover, I gave it 3.5. I thought it was pretty good, especially for Romita Jr. Channeling his inner Ditko and Gale there. So that was pretty good. The interior art, I gave it a 4. My favorite part of the book. I just love Gil Kane's work, especially his action shots, and what's not to love. So give that a 4. For the story, gave it 3.5. Had a great sense of foreboding, and I did like the whole topsy-turvy portion. Is like, oh, the dead is suddenly alive again, but not in the typical comic book way of, they stuck her in a vat of healing chemicals and she's suddenly alive again. So pretty cool. 3.5. Concept, I gave it the same score, 3.5. Makes a lot of sense. You take something happened in the recent past, a big storyline for the burgeoning comic book crowd, turn it on its head, and you're probably going to sell some books, right? And it's got Spider-Man on the cover, so that usually helps. So 3.5 as well. And tabulating all those up came out to a 3.5, and I'd agree with that. I was actually leaning toward a 4 in some points of this, or some parts of this book, but yeah, I think 3.5 is a pretty fair grade for it from my perspective, and I would definitely recommend someone reads it if they hadn't read it before. So, especially if they enjoy that series. And the other good thing is, I forgot to mention this before, is it wasn't really full of Spider-Man tropes. Like, he wasn't joking all the way through there, which for me is one of the big turnoffs for me in the book. I can't really stand that, the inner monologue. He's actually out of monologue with him all the time. So that was kind of good. It was a little more of a serious Spider story, which I kind of dig on. So yeah, 3.5. I think it's a real fair grade for it.
Nice. Yeah. Overall, like I said, really, I thought the cover was good. It had a little bit of wonkiness to it from Mr. Romita Jr. The interior, I think Gil, I keep calling him Gil, definitely, he brought his A game for this one. Great action scenes in there. A couple of like flatter sort of poses, but generally it was really, really good. Not enough pinups, not enough of that for me. But yeah, definitely like the interior art, definitely like the cover, maybe not as much. Story, I think if you're going to do this kind of thing, I think it was a real smart play to just show that it wouldn't benefit Peter to have saved Gwen. And I think the story would have been a lot lesser if Peter and Gwen had gotten married and gone out happily ever after, and everything was good, and he was Spider-Man, right? No, I think that having that put on there was good. If you're gonna do a what if book, you gotta throw this one down, man. I mean, this was probably the one that everybody was like, yeah, what would have happened if Gwen had lived? Probably could have stretched this what if out couple of issues of what if, made it stretch it out as a bigger story. So concept wise, I think they really got it. And yeah, overall I gave it a 3.5 again. One of the things I always say, would I recommend reading this? If someone said, man, give me a good what if book that I should read, this would be one of the ones I would recommend, right? Yeah, read that Gwen Stacy one, or read that Conan in the 20th century one, right? So yeah, 3.5 overall for my overall grade on there. Right, would recommend it. And you guys, if you see a True Believers copy around or whatever, it's well worth grabbing and just giving it a read and being like, yeah, you know what, this is kind of neat. Yeah. Oh, Cosmic Ghost Rider in there.
What was your grade there, Dave?
Oh, what's that?
What was your grade?
3.5.
3.5 as well. Yeah. All right, it seems solid.
Would recommend it.
I guess here's the next question: is this going to be on the next bargain bin buys right now for the. Is this going to get fancy when Gwen is in the movies now?
No, I wouldn't say that this is a good undervalued pick. It has gone up in price. This is not exactly one of the cheaper what ifs to pick up, but yeah, I wouldn't bother too much picking it up. If you go get the True Believers one, you're set for reading that one. I mean, if you want to get the entire What If series, I hear that they're going to have a season 2 of the What If show, which, like I said, a lot of these stories were really mediocre, and not everybody was. It wasn't exactly the X-Men or anything like that with these What If books. So it was surprising when Disney picked What If to do a series out, in my opinion. But there should be a season 2 coming out. Maybe this will be one. Maybe there'll be a Spider-Man story, and they'll pick this one, and the price will skyrocket, and we can all retire.
Now I got my digital copy, but what if it's appreciated? Right. Yeah.
All right, guys.
The chat overall was a 3.5. Sorry, I didn't tell you that. Yeah.
Well, the chat overall was a 3.5. So we're all right there.
Mm-hmm.
We've always got a really smart audience. Follows along. We got a really opinionated one too, though. So if somebody doesn't like it, they definitely give it a 1. Nobody's shy about doing that in the chat on this one. So I think general consensus was pretty good issue of What If. If you're picking issues of What If to read, maybe grab this one up. If you're a collector, definitely one. Maybe you do want to pick this one up before it actually doubles in price or whatever, from $12 to $24, because of this little scene in the movie. What if he had saved her? Who knows what's going to happen to Mary Jane in that? Maybe he'll snap her spine. We got to report that there's 3 more Tom Holland Spider-Man movies coming up, but I don't know if the actress that plays Mary Jane is signed up for that yet. So who knows?
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I think we're going to end the show here. Thank you for everybody that has joined us in the chat. Like I said, we've always appreciated our chat. Always appreciate you guys following along and giving us a grade. Good to see these guys. We had a little bit of a pause on Graders Notes for a bit, but that's okay. Thanksgiving was for you guys and what's going on. So we took a little pause, but we're back. I think we're going to miss the Christmas day. So we'll see how the holiday schedule plays out, and whether we'll be back with what sort of capacity in December we come back. Who's next? Who comes after me? Oh, it's Kenny, isn't it?
Let's see. Yeah, it's Kenny's turn. So I have no idea what the next book's going to be. Let me check and see if he posted anything real fast. Yeah, I don't see anything. So
no, I haven't seen him. He's been real busy at work. So you got to give the guy credit for doing his job well.
Mold doesn't stand a chance.
He's been going after, slowly but surely, some big boy books too lately.
I've noticed that. Also, we can start trading comics now. Is that the new thing? I see. Thanks, Matt, for putting that out there. People are gonna start trading comics again, and I think Kenny will. Didn't Kenny trade a big book to somebody?
He almost got an X-Men #1 as part of a trade. Maybe it's a different one. He gets lots of big books. That guy.
Yeah, he was trying to buy X-Men 1 last year or something. I think he found a good deal on like a 1.5 or something.
Yeah, it fell through his deal, but I think he was going to get it for like $7,000 or something, and some trades.
Dude, 4 summers ago, I watched a friend of mine on YouTube buy a X-Men #1 6.0 for $6,000.
Good deal, man.
It was a good deal at the time, but it wasn't outrageous deal. I mean,
it's an outrageous deal now.
That book nowadays is a house.
Oh yeah,
like insane with collectibles.
Wait till that first X-Men trailer drops, then he'll be really smiling about buying that book.
Isn't like first appearance of Punisher now like over 2,000 for a decent grade?
Oh yeah,
I think a 9.8 is like 5 figures.
Because I know the reason I remember that one so well, because I was a huge Punisher guy and I wanted the #1 so bad, but it was like $120 something back in the late 80s or early 90s when I was collecting. It's like I can't afford that. So I was like amazed. I couldn't believe it went up that much, you know.
Oh yeah, man. Mine's like probably an 8.
There's a couple of Bronze Age books that I really regret not snagging 3 or 4 years ago. That's one of them. And Iron Fist 14. I really love Sabretooth, and I'm just not paying that kind of money now.
Yeah, that was another one I never pulled the trigger on. I had it in my sights, but I never pulled the trigger. Same with 121, and yeah. Hell, I remember looking on eBay in like 2010, like way when eBay was back when you had to like send out a money order to people. There was no such thing as PayPal. And I remember looking at a copy of, Amazing Fantasy 15. It was going for like $1,600 or something like that. It was only like maybe a 2 or a 3, but it's just like, should have bought it.
The funny thing is, Sabretooth was really hot too in the late 80s, so I'm sure that wasn't a cheap book even then. Because like him and Archangel, for whatever reason, were in Bullseye. Those 3 were like super hot properties, I remember. And so I don't know what that book cost back then, but it's probably a pretty penny.
That's another one I regret missing. I really love Bullseye.
Bullseye's number 1. Would have been good. Yeah, I don't have it either. Never collected Daredevil. I like Daredevil, but just never. Can't collect everything, man.
No.
Right? But
well, good show, boys.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming on and doing this with me, and thanks everybody in the chat for sticking around for as long as you have. There's a few of us still hanging in here, and yeah, we are going to be back, right? A couple weeks. We'll see
with a mystery book.
Maybe somewhere else.
Mystery book. Mystery.
There'll be some Instagram posts or something about it. All right, everybody. Everybody have a great night. And we'll see you next time on Graders Notes.
Ciao now, Brown Cow.